There are places in the world where time feels like it stops, where strange things happen that can't be explained. When Emma Price inherited her late aunt's house, she thought she was gaining a peaceful retreat. But when she stepped inside, she found something far darker than she'd ever expected. A secret kept for decades, and a curse that wouldn't let her leave. Emma Price had always known her aunt's house was a strange place, but when her aunt passed away, Emma never imagined she'd be the one to inherit it. The old Victorian manor stood at the edge of town, isolated and draped in secrets. People whispered about it, but Emma had never paid attention. To her, it was just another piece of her family's history. But when the lawyer's letter arrived, informing her of her inheritance, she couldn't resist the pull. The house was hers now, complete with all its rooms, dust-covered furniture, and a lingering presence she couldn't shake. She arrived on a crisp autumn evening, the sunset casting long, eerie shadows across the house. As she stepped out of her car and looked up at the looming structure, she felt an odd chill run down her spine. The house seemed alive, not in a welcoming way, but in a manner that suggested it had seen things. Inside, everything was exactly as she remembered it from childhood visits, except now it felt different, quiet, empty, the air thick with silence. But then Emma noticed something peculiar, a door. It was a door she'd never seen before. It stood at the end of a narrow hallway, concealed behind a faded tapestry. She hadn't remembered it when she visited as a child, and when she reached for the handle, she felt an unsettling sensation, like it was meant to remain shut. But curiosity got the best of her. The door creaked open, and everything changed. Inside was a room that shouldn't have existed. A small, windowless space, with walls covered in strange symbols and markings, almost as if the walls themselves had been scarred. A large, darkened mirror stood at the far end of the room, reflecting nothing but shadows. And then, Emma heard it. A soft whisper, her breath caught in her throat as she turned, expecting someone to be standing behind her. But there was no one. The whispering came again, closer this time, as though it was right next to her ear. Emma's heart pounded. She backed away from the mirror, but her feet wouldn't obey. Her eyes were locked on the glass, where something was beginning to form. At first it was faint, just a shifting blur. But then it became clearer. A figure, a woman standing in the mirror, her eyes dark and empty, staring directly at Emma. The woman's lips barely moved, but Emma could hear her voice inside her head. Emma felt the temperature drop. Her breath turned to mist in the cold air. Panic surged in her chest. She tried to scream, but the words caught in her throat. The figure in the mirror smiled, a slow, cruel smile. Suddenly, the mirror began to shake, rattling violently as if something was trying to escape from within it. The floor beneath Emma trembled, and the room spun around her. The door slammed shut, trapping her inside. She banged on the walls, screamed, but the whispers grew louder, more demanding. Emma's pulse quickened, and she stumbled backward toward the mirror, horrified by what she was seeing. The reflection of the woman was now moving, reaching through the glass, her fingers stretching toward Emma's throat. Desperation surged as Emma grabbed at the door, trying to force it open. Her hands shook, her breath ragged, but the door remained locked, as if it had no intention of letting her go. Then suddenly, everything stopped. The whispers, the movement, the cold air. It was quiet again. Too quiet. Emma turned, unsure of what to expect, but when she looked into the mirror, she saw something that made her freeze. It wasn't her reflection anymore. It was the house, the same house she had entered that evening, dark, decaying, and overrun with shadows. She wasn't looking at herself. She was looking at the house in the reflection, and from inside the mirror, the door to the hallway, the one she had just entered through, was now open. And standing in the doorway of the reflection was her own reflection, watching her from within the mirror. The real Emma could barely breathe. The reflection spoke, and in that moment Emma realized with horror, she wasn't alone in the house anymore. She had become a part of it. The room began to shake again, the walls closing in around her. She could feel something, someone, pushing against the very fabric of reality. Emma couldn't move. She was paralyzed, trapped in the room with no way out. With one last desperate effort, she screamed, but her scream was cut short as the darkness rushed in, swallowing her whole. They found Emma's body 2 days later, still standing in front of the mirror, her face frozen in a look of terror. The house remained silent, as it always did. And the door? It stayed closed. But the house knew. It knew that Emma had opened something that could never be closed again. And now, someone new would always wait behind that door. In the silence of the house, the whispers continued.